Welcome to Inform TV. I'm Alan Repke, Alexandria, Minnesota. To you, my Twin City audience, I want to make sure you understand when Inform TV puts content on the air for you to watch in the Twin Cities, you're not going to be just listening to me in any manner, shape, or form. My goal is to see that you, my audience, is informed, and I want to bring a broad range of backgrounds and people and expertise and opinions so we can address some of the issues that face us today, especially with this COVID-19. Today I'm going to have a veterinarian give some background on his experiences with disease in livestock and a whole range of things relating to our experts telling us what is fact, and if we simply do this, we're protected. So Keith, give my audience a little introduction of yourself and background.
Yeah, so actually the background is pretty important because it's our story that really gives us our perspective on what's going on today in the world. But I'm a veterinarian. I graduated from the University of Minnesota in 1986. I grew up in southwestern Minnesota, a small town of Round Lake. Grew up on a 400-acre family farm. We raised pigs, cattle, chicken, and we had corn, soybeans, alfalfa, so a real traditional farm. And my dad drove school bus to help with extra income, so I think he made a good living, but it was a struggle. So having that background, I enjoyed the farm, I enjoyed agriculture, and that's why I wanted to pursue being a veterinarian, because I liked the health aspect of it. I liked help solving problems. I liked working with animals. So after I graduated in 1986, I spent 2 years in northeast Iowa, a really rural practice, working with small independent family farms, mostly dairy there, but some pigs. And in 1988, I was able to move back to our home area. My wife and I were both from that Round Lake area, so we moved back to Worthington. And I practiced in Worthington from 1988, and I just recently retired, actually just last year. It was an interesting time of practice because there was a lot of family farms that we worked with. And again, I did a lot of dairy work, but I transitioned more to swine. But our clients really started to make a big transition as well. They moved from the family farm into the larger farms, and I think in the 1990s there was this, I think we say there's a century of change, 100 years of change in a 10-year period. Things changed so fast, and our practice changed because we saw the changing of agriculture, and I think that sets up why we are, from an agricultural standpoint, why we look like we do today. We're larger. We're not. The family farms are still there, but the family farms are much larger. The small independent farm that I started with as a client just doesn't exist anymore. And as a veterinary clinic, we got criticism for maybe catering to the larger client as we progressed. And what I always said is that I wish I could practice the way I practiced when I got out of vet school in 1986. It was great. Small family farmers, you're working with them, you go in for a cup of coffee after you make a farm call for them, and that was a great time. But that way of farming changed, and they could not make money anymore, and so that's why the consolidation occurred. And if we didn't change with the consolidation, we would have been out of business. So we continue to change, and our focus was on pigs, although large animal primarily, but I did a lot of pig work, and then we developed different businesses in Worthington that helped supplement the veterinary work. We started a pig management company, which I worked in from 2000 to 2015. And then we also started a vaccine laboratory in 1998. We made autogenous vaccines, and I worked specifically with that organization since 2011 is when I started to work full-time with Newport Labs. And so that does give us a perspective on the disease and the things that are happening, but I think also from an agricultural standpoint, because we're dealing with larger farms, larger populations, veterinarians developed a way of managing these populations, and certainly viruses are a big part of our management expertise, but also our management focus, because those viruses affect pigs, and when they affect pigs, you get sick pigs. When you get sick pigs, you got increased cost of production. And at the end of the day, we need to make money raising the animals. And so the producers, the farm owners, the animal owners really do rely on the veterinary community to help them control their disease. If you control your disease, you got a better chance of making profit. And so we spend a lot of time discussing how we control viruses. And we have had, probably in my time, a lot of different influenza viruses come into the population. So we work with how do we manage that. We've had a coronavirus, and it was more of an enteric virus, and that virus actually did come from China. At least that's our suspicions, and so we dealt with that as a veterinary community. We've been dealing with a disease since 1990 called PRRS, P-R-R-S, Porcine Reproductive and Respiratory Syndrome virus, and we're still dealing with that. But our methods of management of that virus really has taught us how do we live with the disease, how do we live with the virus, and how do we create a herd immunity so we can get the healthiest pigs. And again, health results to profitability, but how can we get the healthiest pigs for our producers? And so as we hear herd immunity talk, that's really what veterinarians have been talking about for quite a while. And certainly on the swine veterinarian side of things, with the help of a lot of the different universities and commercial companies, there's been a lot of money, a lot of effort, a lot of research put into the spread of viruses and control of viruses. And, are they spread on our hands? Are they spread, through the equipment that we use? Where are these viruses coming from? Or do they come with the new pigs? How do we prevent the new pigs bringing new viruses in? And so I do look at with interest of what's going on, and there's been some really prominent swine veterinarians in Minnesota that have spoken up in regards to there's some things that we need to consider, and I see some changes happening that I think some of the health officials have recognized. The importance of testing. Actually, Governor Walz's request to test everybody with either for the virus or for antibody is really something that we do a lot of in the pig industry. And we've been dealing with these tests for a number of years. And so we've had the ability over time to scale up the testing capabilities. But, if we do thousands of tests every week, we test pigs, we test their mothers, and we test new animals coming into the farm. And if they're positive before they come into the farm, we don't let them come in. So we do follow the quarantine process. So it's interesting to watch how all these things have developed, how they've over time, the information that we have, the science that we put into it, but also realize that it is a biological entity. It will be unpredictable. There are certain things that we said it will behave this way, but every virus is a little bit different. And so as experts say this is what's going to happen, I think as I read those experts, there's a lot of things that, if it behaves normally, that is what we expect to happen, but you still got to wait until the virus does what it's going to do to know exactly how to handle that.
Well, Keith, my Informed TV audience, they hear about now we're going to have a vaccine by the first of the year. Trump has said that. Some of the medical or research organizations, drug manufacturers, whatever, are talking about how long it's going to take. Can you give us a little background as far as your practice when you, as a group of veterinarians, were facing all these issues? got into the pharmaceutical end, right? Would that be a right way to put it, or was it a vaccine?
It was vaccines, it wasn't specifically pharmaceuticals. As I look at pharmaceuticals, I think of that being more of antibiotics and different drugs that are used. But you could put vaccines into pharmaceuticals. That we're dealing with the vaccine side of things. And so we had an autogenous laboratory which allowed us to isolate a virus and then make a vaccine from it. And we would make it out of bacteria as well. The advantage that we had is that we did not necessarily have to prove that it was effective before we used it. That was the definition of autogenous. If we can isolate the virus or bacteria, we can make a vaccine from it, and then we can use it and then see what happens. We had to do everything. It was regulated by the USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, so we had protocols, we had outlines that we needed to follow, and we had the USDA come in and inspect our facilities and make sure we were making a quality product that didn't make animals sick. And so that was probably the first criteria. And so the success of the vaccine really depended upon how well they worked. So it's a little easier with animals than it is with people, because you need to have some assurance that there's going to be a benefit of the vaccine in people before you go through and start vaccinating. Actually, I just read an article this morning about there are vaccines being tested in people now, and they're primarily testing safety component of it. They want to make sure that the vaccine they're making isn't going to make people sick or give them reactions or make them die. That had nothing to do with if it's going to work or not. First step is we got to make sure it's not going to make the people sick. And so, and they also have been working with it in monkeys, and they have determined that if the monkeys have been exposed to this coronavirus, if they are re-exposed, that there is some immunity there. And so it's monkeys, not people, but it's very promising. So that's just another one of those steps that theoretically, if we make a vaccine that gives an immune response, gives a antibody titer level to that pig, is that going to protect the pig when it's challenged with the virus? So far, the initial work shows that it is. So it's becoming, it's getting closer. The challenge that they have on the human side will be the approval of the vaccine, because they are going to have to show some efficacy. And so that's going to take some time, and it's, who knows how long it's going to take. You've heard anything from 6 months to a year. I think if you're going to be betting, you're going to bet on the longer time versus shorter time, because it's just difficult to know if you can produce a vaccine that's going to be effective. Then there's going to probably be 2 doses. There's a lot of different technologies that can be used. They can grow the virus up and then kill it and use the killed vaccines, which is a lot of the influenza vaccines that we get are made that way. There are subunit vaccines where they grow up parts of the virus, take that out and put it into a vaccine, but will that create enough immunity? So it's an interesting thing to watch, but it's not necessarily easy. I mean, look at the AIDS virus. We've not been able to create an effective vaccine, and we've worked on that for years. So I think it's hopeful. Coronaviruses are fairly common. They're fairly straightforward. They generally behave the way most viruses behave. And so far, there's really been nothing that's been happening that has, at least that I've observed, that would say that there's something really unique about this virus that we cannot get a good vaccine for. However, on the pig side, we don't have excellent coronavirus vaccines either. So we have some vaccines, but we generally manage our diseases more by management rather than vaccines. And because you can do that, you got population management, and we can expose a large group of pigs, get them immune, and then move on. And we're not able to do that with people, and that's really where the controversy of herd immunity, what's the best way of getting it? Is it best that everybody gets sick quickly, or do we pull it out slowly? As you listen to the experts, pretty much everybody agrees we got to have a certain level of herd immunity before this will slow down or stop. Yeah, I've heard anywhere from 50% up to 80% of the people of a population needs to be exposed before we have immunity. That's a pretty high number, and if our social distancing, if the methods that we've been doing really does slow that down, all that's going to do is slow it down. We're still going to have to be exposed to that. But the advantage of waiting is maybe we will have a vaccine come. Maybe we will find pharmaceuticals that will allow us to get through this virus infection better. Maybe we'll just know more about the virus in a month from now than we would a month ago. And so there is an advantage of maybe spreading it out to let that herd immunity develop slowly versus quickly. Now, the Sweden approach is that they said, we're not going to do that. Let's get people sick now, maybe not as quickly as possible, because they're trying to do the common sense things. They are looking out for the elderly and trying to protect that population, the high risk population. But their answer would be, yes, we may have more people die quickly, more up front, but evaluate us after a year from now or 2 years from now. After a year from now, will there be more? Will we have more deaths per capita than anybody else? And I did see something this morning is that they do have more deaths per capita than most other countries, and that would be expected. So time will tell what the best way is to manage these the herd population, the herd immunity, and it's interesting to watch how different countries doing it. But there's also a lot of difference between Sweden and the United States. There's a lot of difference between New Zealand and the United States when you have a smaller country, and with the United States being as mobile as we are, it's really a different scenario that affects how quickly and how well herd immunity is established.
I want my Informed TV audience to understand, and I'm sure when they watch this the first time, and I tend to loop stuff a little bit so people can see it and tell their friends or watch it again, just like we're doing now, and I appreciate the way you're doing it. But to my audience, I want them to listen to it again, because we've been talking both about pigs to get some background,
Yep.
which you're greatly doing. At the same time, we're giving some insight on the human factor. And obviously, Keith, they're going to say, well, we're recording this, I believe it's Thursday the 21st, right?
Correct.
And they're going to say, well, this veterinarian, this scientist, he doesn't have a mask on. If you saw my face, I don't have a mask on. So from a standpoint of you and your wife or your kids, grandkids, what's your thought on the mask situation?
Well, I think that's an interesting question, and now you start walking into personal opinion. And out of the gate, I say that I respect everybody's decision, that's what they want to do. If they feel that they want to wear a mask, I absolutely respect that. And when my wife and I go out into public places such as to get groceries and places like where a lot of other people where there's some mask being worn, we will wear a mask. And my primary reason for that is I want people to feel that I'm doing what I can to protect them from getting infected. Now, how much difference that makes, I don't know, but we're dealing with perception on these things right now. So we don't know of what's best on that. Right now, if I want to get exposed to coronavirus, I want to get exposed to a small amount. And I think that dose exposure is important. I feel like I'm healthy, and I'd rather get exposed to a small amount. And right now, within Douglas County, I don't know what our case count is, but it's not real high. We haven't had any deaths here. There's some areas where there's a high infection rate, and their risks are higher, because if they're going to run into the virus, they're going to probably hit with a higher dose, and you got a higher risk of getting more severe disease from that. So we are not going out looking to get infected, but we also realize if 80% of us are going to get it at some point, some point we're going to get it. Now, I'll also say that that's back to what I said before. Everybody has an opinion. What's right on this, nobody really knows.
Exactly.
You've got so many different opinions on this, and I read them all. And there's some I could discredit, but that's my opinion, and we don't know. So that's part of the problem we have. We have so much information available to us. If we have an expert, or even if Governor Walz says this is what we think we should do, he has a lot of good evidence to support that that's what he should do. On the other side of the fence, there's a lot of good evidence to say that something else should be done. So he's in a tough spot.
Oh, there's no question.
Any leader right now trying to navigate their way through this, it's great to be an armchair quarterback because it's easy to do.
I will see you and your wife out at the Interlochen Inn, or maybe the Lure restaurant here in town, or Pike and Pint, and so on down the line. When things open up now on the 20th or the 1st of June, it looks like it's going to be outside only, and will you go to the restaurants right away, or are you going to hold back?
Again, that's a good question. We were with a group of people last night. I think there were 8 of us. We were meeting. We were social distancing. We were meeting outside, and we kind of went around and asked that question. And that group, since they were already willing to meet as a group already, they said that they would visit restaurants. We will visit restaurants. In fact, I don't really have a lot of hesitation to visit restaurants. I do think our biggest risk will be coming across somebody that is actively sick, actively shedding the virus. And they don't have to be sick to shed the virus. That's a difficult part. So it's your individual, personal decision what you want to do.
What do you think about now? My neighbors right to the east here 2 days ago got back from Florida all winter long. My landladies will probably be back. Her and her boyfriend will be back in a day or two. What's your thought with this process? And one of the things I was always surprised that the doctors or these COVID sessions with Governor Walz would never talk about these guys coming back. Do you think it would have been beneficial for them to be quarantined for 14 days or 7 days? Any thought that way, Keith?
Well, I think there are some areas, some communities that definitely would quarantine them for 14 days when they come back because you're unsure of the history. You know, I think the information that's missing, and at least from what I've been able to read, and I'm sure the people that are advising Governor Walz probably know more than this, that has this social distancing, has this quarantine really made a difference. Without a doubt, if you are infected, you are positive, you better quarantine. You know you have it. You better quarantine yourself until you're done shedding. I totally agree with that. But if you don't know your status and you don't know if you're positive, doing these social distancing guidelines, self-quarantine things, has that really made a difference? We don't know. So again, that's one of those things you could talk both sides of the fence on that, and a good argument maybe on both sides. If you want to do everything possible, yes, everybody should be quarantined. But that's not to say that as soon as you walk out of quarantine, you go into Alden's and buy a gallon of milk, you're not going to get infected.
What way, and I think they're doing it the wrong way, Keith, what would be your recommendation to the governor and his health people as far as to get a better handle on how many in Minnesota have it? You know, you just said Douglas County, we don't think we have it here, but all of a sudden we're going to be drowned with these people coming back from the south in old people's area. Would you go along with doing a random statewide test where we would either test 10,000 people throughout Minnesota? To me, that's what is needed to get an idea of what the population has right now. What's your thought on that, Keith?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, and I think Governor Walz he said something 2-3 weeks ago, and maybe more now, that the goal would be to test everybody.
But do you think that's really valuable? If
I think it'd be very valuable. The other part of it would be the antibody test that goes along with that. Again, if these tests are reliable, and I sense that maybe there's some question of accuracy of these tests, and so if we do a lot of testing, we get results. What do we do with those? So maybe they're sorting that out. Maybe they're scaling up so they can run those adequate tests. But if we know who's positive, we can start putting people into groups, and certainly at the larger facilities and the meat processing plants that they're doing, that's part of what they're doing. They have grouped the positive people, they've grouped the positives and now negatives, the ones that have never been exposed, so putting them in different areas to help protect them or manage their populations based off of your virus exposure. If we knew, that would allow us to manage ourselves a lot better.
Back to your group of veterinarians that formed your own business to have your own lab and that type of thing. How long did it take for you, or what was the frustration as far as getting an accurate test? You controlled your own lab. You had pigs, which are basically test dummies. I mean, if a pig dies, as long as it doesn't get in the meat, I'm sure you didn't have too much problem with USDA. Give us a little thought that way.
So test developments really are, and again, in the animal side, we've done a lot of that, not necessarily, yeah, we've done some of that at our laboratory as well. And there is good technology out there and good scientists to develop good tests. And certainly on the virus detection, that's one type of test, and I think those tests are pretty good. The antibody tests, we look for specificity and sensitivity of these tests. Those are a little more difficult to evaluate, and that's how I see we're running into those challenges right now. So antigen detection, meaning virus detection, is it positive or not positive? Those tests are pretty reliable. That technology is pretty good. And actually from our side of things, on the animal side, the diagnostic laboratories, state diagnostic laboratories really had good access to good tests. I feel that's still the same way with coronavirus. It's back into the antibody test where I think some of our challenges exist.
Keith, I want my Informed TV audience to understand, I was in China the day after normalization when they weren't hiding anything from us. It was incredibly open, the best time to go to China. But can you give about a minute explanation or what they faced first in an epidemic over there that I think is way bigger than COVID-19 relating to African swine fever? Tell us about that. What percentage of their hogs did they lose, you think, a year ago?
That's a good question, and I'm retired now.
50%, right?
I'm not going to give her a percentage because I wouldn't know for sure. I have a lot of colleagues that work in China a lot and are really close to that, so they have a better percentage. But it was devastating to the pig farmers in China. They lost thousands, millions of pigs, and it's a virus that was very hard for them to control. And again, that's another virus that's very difficult to get a vaccine for. That virus is a lot different than the coronavirus. The world has been working on a vaccine for African swine fever for a long time, and we've not been able to find one. There's a lot of thoughts that we're not going to get one. So they've had to control their African swine fever by population management. I think they're doing a good job of that, but there's still a lot of farms out there. So,
Keith,
yeah.
we're going to have you back. This is Alan Repke, Informed TV.